Have a look at that. Would you like to have an edge like that on your knife? Stick around and I'll show you how to do that. Good evening, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Tonight we're going to have a little chat about the Benchmade Bushcrafter knife, also known as the Model 162. It's one that I have and I enjoy using it. I take it to the woods and use it quite a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about it while I also sharpen it tonight. I'll bring you in close and show you exactly what it is that we're going to do here with the Hapstone. So just a few of the real quick specs about this knife. It obviously it's a Benchmade. It's a Shane Siebert design. The steel is CPM S30V. Some people like it, some people don't. It's not what you would call your traditional bushcraft steel, although it served me well and a lot of people do enjoy it. It's a little less maintenance. It is a stainless as opposed to a carbon steel. And it's fairly durable. It holds an edge quite well. But we will talk a little bit more about the edge here in a bit. The blade length is 4.4 inches. The blade thickness, it's a beast. 164 thou. Overall length, 9.15. And the weight of it, well, it's a little heavy, but it is a bushcraft knife, and I told you about how thick the steel is. It's 7.7 ounces. The green, there's two versions. There's one with a green handle with red scales, and there's one with a tan, sandy, brown type color handle as well. Both of them are G10 scales. The green one comes with a leather sheath that I've added a few little things to. And the brown one comes with a plastic, I believe probably even a Kydex sheath. It comes with a loop for a fire steel. I've added my own fire steel to it. It's got a belt loop here that you can put it on your belt, or it's got a built-in D-ring that you can hang it in different configurations on a dangler or whatever. All right, so what do I like and what don't I like? It doesn't fit too bad in the hand. It does have a bit of a palm swell to it, so it gives you a grip. It's got a spot to put your thumb for when you want to get in close. It doesn't have a finger choil, it has a guard. It came with a nice sharp edge. It was quite sharp, but I found it just didn't seem to cut right, and I couldn't quite figure out why. It seemed good and sharp, but it just seemed to be just hard to push through things in it. I couldn't do fine cuts, I couldn't do feather sticks with it. So I was a little concerned until I found something else out. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Something that I'm going to fix here tonight. Alright, so quick little diagram here, just to show you exactly what it is that I'm doing today and some of the issues that I found. So this here represents the knife, the profile. So if you were to take the blade and cut it right down here and then spin it around and look at the profile of the blade, that's what that diagram represents here. So this would be the spine at the top of the blade here, and then the flats, which of course would be this edge here, and then the grind of the knife coming down here, and then the actual sharpened edge or the bevel which would be right in here. So of course this isn't quite to scale, but that would be right in there. So, and then this here is just an enlargement of it. So what I have found, much to my surprise, was once I put this on my sharpener and was able to measure the angle, what I did was I put a mark here, and you can even see it. I put a black mark along the primary bevel right here. And then I adjusted my sharpener until I found the angle where my stone would remove the marker evenly right along that entire edge, not just down close and not up here, but the whole edge. And what I found, surprisingly, is this angle right in here, right from the center line over, was 35 degrees. That's huge. It makes for a nice strong edge. You've got nice wide shoulders here. So it's very strong. You know, you could beat this through wood and sticks and gravel and just about anything, and you're probably not going to chip it, and it's gonna hold up very well. But it doesn't make it a very fine slicer at all. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to take this and I'm going to narrow it out, and I'm going to bring this angle down to 20 degrees, from 35 to 20. So what that means, in order to do that, I'm going to have to narrow it out. So I'm going to have to remove all this metal in here. And I'll do that on both sides. So that'll give the knife a little less shoulder in here, make it a little bit better of a slicer. But yep, I'm going to narrow it down in here, so it might make it a little bit weaker. So we're going to see how that works out for me. I'm gonna take that down and I'm going to try it out, and we're going to see if that makes it any better of a slicer and makes it easier to carve feather sticks and some of the finer work that I'd like to be able to do with it. And if it doesn't, or if it's too weak, I can modify it again. If I find that the tip is too weak and that I'm losing the edge too fast, going against what you might think, I'm actually going to go even narrower. I'll come even narrower with it. I'll take it down to maybe, say, 17 or 18 degrees and take even more off. But then what I'll do is I'll put a micro bevel in here. And I might go to 22 or something like that. So that'll give me a nice strong micro bevel right in here, and you'll barely be able to see it. I'll only take a little tiny bit off. But we're going to try it with just the 20 degree first and see how that works out, because that's an easier one to put on it, and it's easier to maintain. So I'm going to work through it on my Hapstone, the Genday edition. This is the new version 6. And we're going to go through a series of stones to get it down there. So I have some Shapton glass stones, and I've got those in a 320, a 1000, and a 4000. So that takes it right down to a nice polished edge. But I find the 320 just isn't enough for doing a whole lot of reprofiling. It'll do it, but it's going to take a good long time. So what I'm going to use to reprofile it is one of the utility stones. It came with 3 utility stones, 200, 400, and a 1200. I don't use them very much. They're not the best quality, but they do okay for general purpose, just getting the blade set up, getting the profile established. So I'm going to use the 220 and the utility stone that came with it to establish that, to remove that material that I need to remove, and then we'll go at it with the Shapton stones and work through to bring that down to a nice fine polished edge. Let's talk a little bit about the Hapstone here real quick. This table, as you can see, has a magnet into it, and it holds the blade very well, very secure. You can pretty well work hands-free as you're working on the blade, but not entirely. So tonight I have to decide, do I want to work with the knife mounted on the flat against the table, or do I want to work on the grind and see which is more secure? Every knife is a little bit different, and you have to decide. Looks like working off the flat is more secure. If I try to keep it up on the if I try to keep it up on the flat, it wants to pull down. And so I know that I'm going to find it's going to want to pull down, and I'm going to have a hard time holding it up. So I'm going to work right off the grind. I'm going to mount the grind flush with the table. So that means that I have to compensate for my angle. And I'll show you really quick how I set up the angle and what's going to work best here for me tonight. Now, I have some packing tape set down here on the base of the working table, just to protect it a little bit, because you do work up a slurry and it starts to create a bit of an abrasive. So and it's starting to get worn, but I think I can get one more knife out of this before I replace it. I'll keep an eye on it and see how bad it is, and if it starts to actually wear through, then maybe I'll replace it as I'm going. And if this was a really fine polished knife that I wanted to protect, I would even tape this. I would get either some packing tape or some type of painter's tape and mount on here, and just expose the very edge to work with, because as it's mounted here on the table and it's flush and you're working, there's going to be fine movements like that, and as you work up a bit of a slurry in here with fine metallic particles in that slurry, it's going to leave some marks on this blade. Now, this is a utility knife for me. I use this knife. I take it to the woods. You can see it's already got some marks on it. It's not going to bother me if it gets a few more here and there. It's not that bad. But if you're working with a really expensive custom knife, you're going to want to put some tape on there just to protect it. Now, this knife isn't too big to be able to do the whole thing. There's not enough overhang that I'm too worried about it. There's not enough flex. Obviously, this is a very thick knife. If you were working with a kitchen knife or something quite long, like say this old hickory, you might have too much flex, maybe not. It just depends on the knife. And if that was the case, then you would do a portion at a time. You would work a little bit here, then you could pull it over and work a little bit more and keep working it, and just keeping where you're working right over the table to provide that support. Because if you had a big long knife, if you were trying to work way out here, it would flex too much, and that would mess up the angle of your bevel. Okay, so what I need to do, like I said, is find out where the best spot is. Now, I do see that this blade does have some of a ricasso in here, very little, but I could probably get away. No, not quite. I thought maybe if I just worked with it, with the handle right up flush with the table, that ricasso would keep that blade from flexing. But I can see, look, it does move a little bit, so I'm still going to go back to, like I said, and putting it on here. So first, I'm going to find the angle. And find the best spot to mount it. So you bring the blade up just enough so it's just overhanging the edge of the table. You don't want any of the table exposed like this, because as you're working with your stone, the stone might actually start to hit on the edge of the table. So you bring it up just enough, and then you bring up your guide or your holder till it contacts the back of the knife. And this is a 3-point guide, so it has 2 pieces here. These are connected, and then this piece in the middle. And because this blade has a little bit of a drop point to it, what I'm going to do, so I make sure that I'm the same every time I flip it, I'm going to put it up against the handle and then come back just a touch so I'm on the flat, or on the grind. Find that spot where it's overhanging just a little bit, so it's just the bevel and just a touch more over. Bring that up, And you can see there's a space in here, but it's tight here, so that's okay. Center it, and then bring this up. And then tighten it down. Now, when I flip that blade over, I find that same spot, or I have that exact same spot where it mounts contacts here, the same as it did on its opposite side over here, and it contacts in the middle there. So that way the knife is in the exact same position every time I flip it, and my bevel will be consistent the whole way through. I want the bevel to be the same on both sides. What I don't want to end up happening is to end up with the bevel being higher on one side than it is on the other, and which would actually mean it would come down here and the apex would not be in the center. So as I'm removing that material, I'm going to be watching for that and making sure that I remove equal amounts of material on both sides. And the way you can tell is you work one side and you keep working it and you keep feeling for the back side and you watch for that burr to rise. So what happens as you work that steel down and you start removing it, I'm going to be removing it here at the shoulder. And I'm going to keep coming in and keep coming in, keep coming in until I eventually hit the apex and where I want to be. And once I hit that apex, then it's going to start creating a burr, right? So the steel will all be removed along that new plane. And then we're going to start pushing steel down here. And I'm going to get a little bit of a burr all the way down the whole length of the blade. So I'm going to be feeling for that and making sure that I get a burr the whole way down and that it's consistent and even. And I'll watch and I'll have a look at that edge and make sure that the bevel, the thickness of the bevel right from the apex to the shoulder is the same all the way down. And once I feel that burr the whole way and it looks nice and consistent, then I can flip it over and work the other side and come back and meet it. And then I'll keep removing that material, and then eventually I'll get to where the burr was and I'll push the burr back to the other side and I'll feel for that. And once I've created the burr on one side and then flipped it over and worked the opposite side and pushed that burr back, then I know I have reprofiled that blade. And that's as much as I need to do on my coarse grind. Then I start the process of refining that edge and moving to the finer stones. Okay, so let's get this set up here. So I have my angle cube. And what I do is I mount it on the table. It is magnetic, and this one actually comes with the Gen Day edition, which is nice. You don't have to pay extra for it. And then I zero it out. I'm going to get my stone, my 220, and the utility stones that come with it are water stones. They need to be soaked for a little while first, so it's been soaking for a while. And I'm going to mount it in my stone holder. Make sure it's centered. Okay. So I've zeroed that out. So the table and the plane of the knife that it's sitting on, just on the flat for now, represents 0 degrees. And then it comes with a block here, which the new edition comes standard with. You used to have to pay extra for this, but it comes with a block to mount the angle holder on, and then I'm going to set it on the stone. So then you adjust it till you get to the angle you want. So here I am, right at 20 degrees right there. So if that knife could stay on the flat, then I could start working and have a 20-degree angle. But like I said, it's going to mount, or it's going to want to go down to the flat. So I'm going to pull it back a little bit so it sits down nice and tight on the flat. And now I have to figure out how much that went down. And this is a little bit tricky. There's a few different tricks you can do. You could take another flat stone and put it on there. So what I'm getting is 11.5 degrees. So about 5 3/4 per side is what we're getting, because that knife came down half of that angle that I measured, and then I've also got the opposite side. So that is the angle of the grind. And like I said, it was about 11.5 degrees. And that means about 5 3/4 or so per side. So that means that where I want to start creating that bevel on my knife, because I've now twisted the knife down half of what I measured, the 5 3/4, that I'm going to set the angle on my sharpening stones at 25 3/4. Which is right there. So I'm going to lock that in. Good and tight so it doesn't move. I can put my angle cube away. I'm done with that. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to set this. So this little stop collar here is used as a compensator, or to help you compensate for the different thicknesses of stones. So once I'm done with this stone, I'm going to move to my Shapton glass stone in the 320 grit, and you can see that they're different thicknesses. Okay, so because they're different thicknesses, when they're mounted, that's going to have an effect on the angle, and I don't want to spend all kinds of time creating the perfect bevel with one stone and then put a different stone on that's a different thickness and mess up that angle, either make it steeper or shallower, and take away all the work that I've done. So what this allows you to do is you set it now, bring that up till it's tight, tighten up the little bolt there, and get it nice and tight. So the next time I change stones that are different thickness, I'll loosen that off, loosen the top one off. This one now stays, this one won't move. And because this is a thicker stone, I'm going to loosen that off and raise it up a little bit so it contacts the stone again. And then when I put this stone on, I'm guaranteed to get the exact same angle on my bevel. All right, so let's mount this guy and we'll get started. I keep some water in a spray bottle, so even though I've been soaking this stone and it's still quite wet, I'm still going to spray it every once in a while. And you can see even some of that water is soaking in. And I put just a little bit of simple green in there too, and that helps me clean the stones as I go, especially the Shapton glass stones. They tend to get gummed up with the slurry and the metallic particles, so that helps keep them clean and keep them cutting good. All right, so let's get started. I want to make sure that I hold the knife nice and stable. I'm also going to look at how much stroke that this stone has. And you can see back here that there's another collar. And that keeps you from coming too far back and coming off the stone, but I still have a little bit of travel there, at least an inch or more. So I'm going to adjust that just a touch more. There. So that now gives me full contact. Oops. I have this parking hook just loose now. Jende and Gritomatic have admitted that they had some production problems, and this pivot unit, they had some quality issues. And if you noticed, for me to tighten it up, I had to actually put a rag on there and really clamp down as hard as I can, and they recognize that that's not right. It shouldn't be like that, and I should be able to also tighten this up. There's an Allen screw in here, but their temporary fix for now is to keep that Allen screw loose, and that allows it to get a bit more bite and keeps that nice and stable. They are going to send me a new pivot point or a pivot unit, and a few other parts where they feel that these aren't really of the best quality and they could be better. So kudos to them for stepping up. They contacted me, and I talked a little bit about that in a previous video. So but for now it's still usable, and I actually like that a little bit loose because I can swing it out of the way. I can hang that on there while I need to make adjustments to the knife and whatnot. Okay, so back to it. And you want to let the stone ride across as it comes around that curve in the blade. You don't want to hold it level the whole way across, because then it's only going to be digging in on this edge. You want to let it actually starts to roll down a little bit as it comes around. So you let it work the whole way around. Now, one important tip here is you do not want it to come off the tip like that, because that'll take away the tip. You want to have you want to end up with a nice fine tip there, nice and sharp, comes to a nice point. If you let that slide over, it's going to wear that away. So for the most part, I try to keep that going right to the edge. I might do some finer work out at the edge. Now you're not bearing down on this. You're just using the weight of the stone and maybe a little bit of pressure. This knife does have a sharpening choil cut into it, so it allows you to get a nice fine edge right down at the heel as well. But you want to make sure that you don't go past that and start to ride up in here into the ricasso, because if you allow the right side of the stone to come up into that ricasso, then what happens is the left side starts digging down on an angle, and you're going to end up wearing harder and deeper in here. Now at this point too, we're not going to worry too much about counting how many times we stroke back and forth. It doesn't really matter. We just want to make sure we get it even. And I've got a fair amount of material that I need to work away here. I'm just going to have a quick look here for a burr, which I don't think we're there yet at all. You can see all the material that's coming away, all that slurry with the metallic particles in there. So it's working. A lot of that is stone. That's a combination of the stone wearing away and the material, the metal, which is what you want. You want the stone to wear away. That's what does the cutting. It's the slurry that's created on the stone from the stone particles. If your stone didn't wear away, it wouldn't actually cut. So we'll keep it wet. And we'll get back at it. I try to use the full length of the stone as best I can. If you just work a small area, then you're going to wear down just that area of the stone. You want to try to wear it down evenly. And every time you mount it, you can spin it around so you're working different ends and working it from a different angle. Keep wearing it down. Eventually, they will start to get some concavity to them, and then you'll have to lap them. We'll have to flatten those stones eventually. We can talk about how to do that in another video. Alright, I'm going to keep working on this, but I'm not going to let you guys have to stick around and watch that whole thing because it's going to take a little while to get that down. I'll come back once we get both sides finished. Alright, so just a quick update here. I've managed to finish the other side, the first side that I was working on, and I kept working it until I was pretty happy that the bevel was even the whole way along the blade, and that I was able to feel a burr. So I was able to work the other side until I was able to feel a burr all the way from the heel, all the way along, right out to the tip. So I knew that once I had that burr all the way along, that I had worked away all the material along the shoulders of that original bevel to the point where I had come out to meet the apex. So then I'm ready to start the other side. So again, I just mount it right up tight to the handle, and then I come back just enough that it sits flush on the grind. Wet my stone, and back to work again. So this takes quite a while. I probably worked 15 minutes or so on the other side. And again, that's because I'm removing material with a coarse stone on a fairly hard steel. S30V is a fairly hard steel. I've done this even on D2, and yeah, it takes quite a while. So if you're reprofiling a blade, it's going to take some time. If you're just working with a factory edge that's already there, it's not too bad. You use the marker trick to find that angle where you take a black marker and you draw right along the original bevel with a marker, and then you put a stone on there. I like to just use a fine stone so I don't remove any material. And then you adjust your angle, and you keep just giving it some very light sharpening strokes. And you adjust the angle till you find the spot that it removes the marker. And it removes the marker along the whole surface of that bevel. If it's just removing marker right out towards the apex, right at the sharp edge, then you know you're too high, the angle is too steep. And if it's just removing the marker closer to the shoulder or the upper end of the bevel, then you're not steep enough. So you keep adjusting it till you find it, and once you find it where you're removing the marker the whole way along, then you know you've matched that factory edge, and you can just sharpen it without having to reprofile it, as long as you're happy with that and how it cut. And you don't have to start with the coarse stones. You can start with something a little finer. And it won't take nearly as long. But when you want to reprofile a blade, yeah, you're going to have to put in a little bit of time. Alright, I'll keep working at this, and I'll check back in again once I'm finished this side. I'm pretty well finished up now with the second side. I've worked it enough that I'm quite happy with a nice even bevel the whole way across. And the burr has come out on the other side. You can even tell just by rubbing it on the paper towel that it's catching. And when you're working with those coarse stones, those burrs are very pronounced. Once you get to the finer stones, they're harder to feel. They're not quite as pronounced. But when you're working with these coarse stones, you can feel it just like that. Of course, the other trick is you can feel it catching on your fingernail. So I know that I've worked that. And I'm nice and even. It's dead center. The bevel looks good on both sides. So I have now established the new profile on this knife at 20 degrees per side, a 40-degree inclusive angle that I'm hoping is going to give me the results that I'm a little more happy with out in the field with it. Point's nice, comes right to a nice fine point. Yeah, I think that'll be good. All right, so I'm gonna clean it off one more time here with these paper towels. Clean off that table a little bit. And I'm gonna get rid of those paper towels because they have metal filings in there at that coarser grit. Metal filings and stone filings. So then we're gonna go with clean paper towel and move up to a finer grit. So I'm going to remove the 220 utility stone, throw it back in the water for the next one. Get out my Shapton glass stones. Now they don't need to soak. They're not a true soaking water stone. They just need to be wet. And you can just splash and go. So I do keep them in water a little bit just before, but they don't need to. You can just give them a little spray and you're good to go. So that's my 320. They come with the grit written on the outside, but of course as you use them, that wears down, so you want to make sure you mark it on the back. I've got to get my engraver out and actually engrave them on there because even after time the marker comes off. So we'll get that mounted in there. Alright, so that's the side with the burr over here, because that was the last side I worked with. So I'm going to go back to the burr. And this next stone will knock that off and start establishing a finer edge. So the scratch pattern is going to become much finer because I'm going from a 220 to a 320 stone. Now these are on a different scale too. You have to be careful with that. That kind of caught me off guard. Sandpaper and the utility stones and the stones that you would see from Apex with the Edge Pro, they're on a different scale than the Shapton glass and the Chaucera type stones. So you have to watch out for that. A 320 in a Shapton glass is not as coarse as a 320 in an Edge Pro utility, just aluminum oxide type stone. So you have to watch out for that. It's actually a little finer, and I believe Edge Pro have the conversion chart on their website to let you know. So it might sound like I'm not going from very much from a 220 to a 320, but it actually is. It's quite a larger jump than what you might think. All right, so just going to give that a little bit more water. And you know what I forgot to do? Was I forgot to compensate for that stone. So let's do that before I go much further. That's a little bit of a mistake that I hopefully don't make again. And I did that wrong too. I'm all full of mistakes tonight. I got to put that back to where it was with this stone. There we go. That's where that was. It's not that one you move, it's the top one. So you can see that this stone's a little thicker. So I need to raise this up a little bit. So I will loosen that off. There we go. And I'll set this in here, just like that. I'll snug that up, pull that out. And then tighten her down good and tight. There. There, now I got it right. It's getting late. Not thinking straight. All right, so now, I had to raise that up to compensate for this stone. So my little mistake, what I did was I was actually working the shoulder a little bit more than what I should have. Now, that wasn't very many strokes, so it wasn't enough to really make a difference. I can't even see where I worked into that at all. So I'm back. Yeah, now I'm on it. And you can tell it sounds different too. I was wondering, that's what caught me. That's what actually tweaked me to what I had done wrong there. I could tell by the sound that I was grinding pretty hard into it when I shouldn't have been. I should be on an established bevel now. So I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but I can hear it and I can feel it too. I can tell that it's not cutting, so I'm working on the bevel. So this is going to take a little while, not as long as it took with the coarse ones to reprofile it, but it's going to take a little bit of time here to polish away or to refine the scratch pattern from the previous stones. And that's all I'm really doing here. I'm just taking those scratches that were left from the last stone and wearing away the tops of them. And we're going to be left with new scratches that are finer. And as you work through the grits of the stone, those scratches just get finer and finer, and the blade just keeps getting sharper and sharper. Okay, I'm just going to work this a little bit more. And we're going to have a look at it, see how we're making out, if we're starting to raise a burr on the other side yet. I believe we have. I'm just going to work that tip a little bit more. It's pretty well all there. All right. So again, we're just going to flip it and work the other side and do that again. All right, we'll check back in when it's time to change stones. Okay, so I've worked the 320 stone, and I've done both sides a couple of times. Started out fairly aggressive, just working it back and forth to keep refining that edge, and then I start to get consistent with the pattern. I just use a push stroke so all those scratches are established in the same direction. And I do that on both sides. And what I do every time I switch sides, you can feel that burr. Although the burr is much smaller and harder to detect with this stone, I'm still creating one, and it's still there and it stays attached. So yeah, no matter what grit you finish your stone at, you have to make sure that you remove that burr to get your final sharpened edge. If you leave that burr, that's what you're cutting with. And of course that gets really weak and it rolls over, and then you don't seem to be having an edge that cuts. You have to make sure you remove it. And I'll show you a trick on how to remove that. But of course, as you go to the finer stones, you're refining it as well. So I'm quite happy with where we're at right now with the progress of this. The scratches that were left from the previous stone are completely gone. And the scratches that are now from this stone are much finer. All right, so we're finished with our 320, and you can see the slurry that's left on it. So I'll just give that a little bit of a spray with my water and simple green. You can see it cleans off. And it's ready for next time, for the next knife. All right. Fresh paper towel. And we're going to 1,000. Now this is where we cross the line. We're going from sharpening the stone, where I'm actually removing material, to more of a polish. We're still removing some material at 1,000. But the slurry that's created and the particles that are removed are much smaller. The scratches that are left from this stone will be refined even more and even finer. The scratches that are going to be left from the 1,000 are pretty much invisible to the naked eye. It just looks like it's not a polished edge. It's kind of shiny, but not quite finished. So mount the knife here. Here we go. One last spray on that 1,000 stone, and we'll start working it. Now, what do you notice? Sounds a lot different, right? I'm not grinding. I'm not digging into that material anymore. It feels almost like I'm just rubbing it. So I'm right at the borderline where I'm removing material and polishing. All right, we're going to work this 1,000 for a little while on both sides. I'll see if I can detect that burr anymore, although it's very, very hard to feel at 1,000. And I'm going to keep working that knife back and forth and try to keep it even. So whatever I do on one side, I want to try to do the same on the other. And then I'll get to the point where I'm just doing one simple smooth stroke, and I'll count them. I usually go 10 on each side. I'll do 10 just like that, and count them out and do 10, and then flip it over and do 10, and then flip it back, and I might do 6 or 7 each side, and then I do it 5 times each side, and then 3, then 2, then 1, and I do a couple of times at just 1, back and forth, just one stroke per side at a time. And that refines that edge, and that keeps working that burr till it's just barely nothing left. And then I'm going to show you a little trick to make sure that it's absolutely gone after I'm done with this stone. I'm down to the final strokes on each side now with the 1,000. There. So we've refined that edge from a rough, very scratched edge to something that's getting close to a mirror polish. Not quite, you know, with enough light I can still see some scratches in there, although it is nice and shiny and looking pretty good. And you know what, that knife is very, very sharp. And for a woods knife, it's probably as sharp as it really needs to be. I've got a good working edge there. That would probably even shave. But there's a bit of a perfectionist in me, and I'm going to take it one step further. I've got a 4,000 grit stone that we're going to use. So it's pretty well the same process. We just keep working it. With the 4,000, you're fairly gentle. But it's going to bring out a very mirror edge. Oh, there's my 4,000. We'll start on this side again. All right. And this doesn't take a whole lot to really bring that edge out, bring that mirror out on that bevel. Oh, I forgot something I meant to show you guys. So remember I said that there's still a burr there, and it's very fine, and you really can't even really feel it. You'd have to have very sensitive fingers to be able to feel that. You might be able to tell. If I had a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe, I might be able to see it as well. But it's still there. So, this is a Murray Carter trick. If you guys don't know Murray Carter, you should look him up. He's a knife maker. He uses Japanese style, traditional styles of forging knives, and he does all the sharpening by hand, and very skilled with bench stones. But what he does between his 1,000 and I'm not sure if his final polish is a 3 or a 4,000, you take a block of wood and you take that edge and you just work it down. And that takes away any sort of burr. And in fact, even though I polish that with a cloth, you can still see what looks like maybe just a little bit of metal in there, and you can see some other marks that I've done that. So you only need to do it really once. The first time is what takes it away, and you are left with then your final edge with no wire. They call it a wire edge or a burr, nothing left there. So I like to do that just before my final stone. So I'm not going to work this too hard or for too long. This is hardly any weight at all. Again, just pretty well the weight of the stone. I'm just working it back and forth. Maybe the weight of my hand as well, but no force pushing down on it. So just back and forth a few times to work away those previous scratches. But what I don't really want to do is raise a new burr. I just want to refine that bevel, polish it, and bring that apex in perfect alignment. So I'm just going to do this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'll do that on the other side. And I'll work that down. With this final stone, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. With this final stone, I'm going to work it back and forth and just keep working down. This time I'll do 9 on both sides, then 8, then 7, and all the way down to 1. And that'll get that edge to as absolute fine as it can. So once I'm all done with that, I'll check back in and show you the final steps. When I'm working into the heel here, if I'm working from the heel out, I have to be careful that I don't start moving towards the right before I start moving forward, because it's a combination of a forward stroke and to the right. So it's not just forward, obviously, and it's not just right. It's a little bit of both. But if I start moving to the right immediately at the same time I move forward, I'm coming off the heel of the knife before I've really done anything. So I usually try to come ahead an inch or two and then start going over to my right. And that makes sure that I get the heel evenly with the rest of the knife. So yeah, just 1 or 2 more here and we'll finish it off. Now, if this was a kitchen knife that I really wanted to get just absolutely razor sharp, or a pocket knife that I really wanted to keep absolutely sharp, I would get out the nano cloth next. And I've got a couple of nano cloth strops. I've got a 4 micron and a 1 micron. So this is the 4. They're color coded and it's stamped right in there, 4 micron. And I've got some emulsion, some CBM emulsion in a 4 micron that you put on here and you rub it in, and that soaks right into it. And 4 micron is equivalent to a 4,000 grit stone. Now, just because it's 4, that's just a coincidence. You know, if you moved up to an 8 micron or an 8,000 stone, it would have an equivalent of a smaller micron. So that would really bring out that final polish. Any little scratches that are left, microscopic scratches at that point, it's going to smooth them out even more. But you know what? From this stone, I'm getting a very nice mirror finish. I've refined that burr down till there's essentially nothing left. You saw how I knocked the burr off with the wood, the block of wood. So at this point, I'd say I'm pretty well done with the stones. So there we are. We've got a mirror edge. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it's sharp. It is very sharp. Want to do the shaving trick? Well, we can do that. Look at the hairs just flying off. It's sharp. But I've got one last final step. And even though I'm not going to use the nanocloth strops, I am going to use a kangaroo leather. And it's untreated. I'll just set this over here. So this is an untreated strop. I don't have any paste on it. It's just bare leather. And we're just gonna give that a few strokes. I'm raising it up just a little too much. You can see the tip was digging in. Now, if you, this is just a nice smooth stroke. You want to make sure when you're stropping that you don't roll the knife. Don't roll it up like that. You know, you see guys doing that on old style strops that are hanging. That'll actually start to round out your edge and take away what you've worked so hard to create. So there we go. There's our final edge. And that'll last a very good long time. It'll cut with hardly any force at all. Cut through some rope like that. Now, what do you do to maintain it? Because if you go out there and you work in the woods, yeah, you're going to wear it down. Well, you can strop it. Believe it or not, the strop will actually bring back an edge quite well. And it doesn't have to be anything too fancy. Any piece of leather will work. You can get stropping paste and compounds that help if you want to cut a little bit more. But you can strop it. You can also use a honing rod. If you have a rod like this, you can work it. Now I'm not going to work on this knife because I just sharpened it down to 4,000. These honing rods are good, equivalent to about 1,500 grit. So if you had a knife that needed a little bit of work, but it still had a fairly decent bevel on it, you can just work it like that a few times, straight in the kitchen. and bring back your edge. All right, everybody, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for watching. I know this was a long one, but I wanted to show you the whole process. Next time we're going to do some kitchen knives, and we'll do some pocket knives too. I have a collection of Benchmades that we're going to hit with that as well. So we're going to touch up a few of those with the Hapstone. All right, thanks everyone. Have yourselves a good night, and we'll see you on the next video.